Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilman rabbal alameen. Allahumma a'inna ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Amma ba'd. We are still talking about ishq, and ibnalqayyim rahimahullah started the last lecture talking about it with more focus. And ishq, as we've described before, is this excessive, exaggerated love that dominates the heart of a person until it's about the only thing that they can think about and the only thing that they want to do and pursue. So it's excessive, exaggerated, inflated love. That's what ishq is. And Ibn al-Qayyim here said, وَهَذَا دَاءٌ أَعْيَا الْأَطِبَّاءَ دَوَاؤُهُ وَعَزَّ عَلَيْهِمْ شِفَاؤُهُ. He says this illness is a type of illness that had troubled doctors or those who are seeking remedy for it, had troubled them, was difficult for them to cure. قال وهو لعمر الله الداء العضال والسم القتال. He says, I swear by Allah Azza wa Jal that it is this type of illness is a difficult illness and a fatal poison. Once it is attached to a heart, it's hard then to rescue this person from its captivity. Meaning once a person is captive to that type of love, it is difficult to rescue him from that captivity. It says, and if that flame of that desire or of that love is lit inside a heart, it's hard to extinguish. Now Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, of course, is not saying that that disease is incurable, because he is going to offer suggestions for a cure. So he's not saying it's incurable. What is he saying? It's difficult and chronic. So in effect he's saying, if you know this about it, why would you venture into that illness? Why would you bring it to yourself? Now once you know that something, a type of illness, is so addictive, so destructive, that once you're actually in it, it's hard to leave. You really have to think twice and 10 times before you go into it. Because you say, it's easy to go in, very difficult to leave, or maybe impossible for me, who knows? So he's saying, it is very difficult for you to be able to detach from it. It's very addictive, very dominating. قال وهو أقسام. He says it is of different categories or different levels. He says وتارة يكون كفرا. He said one category of it is disbelief. That means it could be also not disbelief, just a regular illness, a regular sin. But he says it also could reach that level of being kufr in Allah Azza wa Jalla. He's going to explain why. كَمَنِ اتَّخَذَ مَعْشُوقَهُ نِدًّا يُحِبُّهُ كَمَا يُحِبُّ اللَّهِ. It says if you take your beloved as a rival that you love as much as you love Allah Azza wa Jal, it says if that in itself is disbelief, kufr in Allah Azza wa Jal, it says how about if you take that person, your beloved, as someone that you love more than Allah Azza wa Jal? He says that type of love then is something that Allah Azza wa Jal does not forgive, because this is of the greatest form of shirk, and Allah Azza wa Jal does not forgive shirk. He forgives what is beneath it, but does not forgive shirk. So he's saying if what you love as much as you love Allah Azza wa Jal, or you love more than Allah Azza wa Jal, he says this is what? Kufr in Allah Azza wa Jal. You've allowed this love to blow up to the extent where it is competing with Allah's love or exceeds it. And he says وعلامة العشق الشركي الكفري. وعلامة العشق الشركي الكفري. He says, what is the mark or the signal or the evidence of that type of shirk or kufr in love? What is the mark of it? He says, then يقدم العاشق رضا معشوقه على رضا ربه. He said that you would put forward the pleasure of your beloved ahead of Allah's pleasure. So your beloved wants something, and Allah Azza wa Jal wants another. He says, when you put the pleasure and the happiness of your beloved ahead of Allah Azza wa Jal, he says, that's it. وَإِذَا تَعَارَضَ. He says, if there's a conflict between the right of your beloved and the right of Allah Azza wa Jal and His obedience, you will put the right of your beloved and what they want first, what pleases them first. and he will give to his beloved the dearest of what he can do. Meaning, this is the one that you love. He says you will give him the best that you have, all of your effort. And if when it comes to Allah Azza wa Jal, if you give him something, you will give him the worst of what you have, the leftover, the extra. And you will not give him the maximum of your effort, but whatever is left over. He says that is the mark of it. قال فتأمل حال أكثر عشاق الصور تجدها مطابقة لذلك. He says, and consider the situation of most people who are in love with beautiful images, beautiful people, and are devoted to them in that sense. You'll find that they're exactly like that. And he says, consider then their situation, put their situation, their affairs in one hand of a scale, and put the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, their tawheed and their iman, another scale, and tell me with justice which is heavier. Right? So he's saying this is the mark. And of course, you have to keep in mind that he does not mean that every time that this happens, it becomes shirk or kufr in Allah Azza wa Jal. Because we've said before, if you remember, that no one does a ma'siyah, commits a sin, except because at that moment he loves it more than Allah Azza wa Jal, right? Remember that? Because at that moment, no one would commit a ma'siyah, a sin, except that at that moment he favors it more than Allah, loves it more than Allah Azza wa Jal. That does not make it shirk and does not make him a mushrik. Right? Because once he's done with that ma'siyah, he goes back and says what? Astaghfirullah. Hates himself for it, regrets it, determines not to go back. It's not a consistent love for that ma'siyah. It fluctuates. And he admits that what he had done was wrong. It's just at that moment his desire got the best of him. His shahwa, right? Got the best of him. So he did it. His weakness got the best of it. He did it. But then when he's sober, when he wakes up, he says, Astaghfirullah, I should not have done this. I will never go back to it. So that love for it fluctuated. It's not stable. But he's saying with that other ishq, no, that's a stable type of love where that person is always ahead of Allah Azza wa Jal. That person is loved more than Allah Azza wa Jal. The favor of that person is sought more than the favor of Allah Azza wa Jal. The pleasure of that person comes before Allah Azza wa Jal. That is consistent. So it had grown into this person's heart until what? He's before Allah. And you're not going to be able, if a person goes down that route and he has not reached the level of disbelief yet, or kufr, but he's on that way, you're not going to be able to note the transition where it stops being sin and goes into kufr. Like if you walk that path and the love of that person and your madness about them keeps growing, and you feed it and you don't fight it, and you keep feeding it and you don't fight it, you're not going to know the instant when you become a disbeliever because of that belief or because of that love. That's why you would have to fight it beforehand. You have to stop it beforehand. Huh? And that's why also when he said that this is the mark, when you put that person ahead of Allah Azza wa Jal, that's why also you have to think about it every time that you're committing a sin, and say to yourself, if you keep doing it, you are cementing the status of this thing before Allah Azza wa Jal. If like I'm doing it for the sake of another, or I'm doing it for myself, and every time that I have a decision to make between pleasing Allah or pleasing this person, or pleasing Allah and committing that sin, and every time I'm putting Allah Azza wa Jal behind, every time you're making that choice, what are you doing? You're cementing your detachment from Allah Azza wa Jal and attachment to another. You follow me? That ma'siyah, as it builds up, what does it lead to? Eventually, what is the eventuality of a ma'siyah? Kufr. Right? You follow, right? Eventuality of a ma'siyah keeps being repeated over and over and over. It becomes so overwhelming, changes the heart, changes the mind, it becomes into kufr. Now you're not going to be able to note the line when you've crossed, because you're not aware. Person on the outside may be able to tell, but you're not going to be able to tell. That's why you have to stop it way before it reaches that stage. Right? So he continues. قال وربما صرح العاشق منهم. Someone who is this madly in love with another could actually be explicit and say that this person is closer to them than Allah Azza wa Jal. So he brings two verses of poetry. One of them is يترشفن من فمي رشفات هن أحلى فيه من التوحيد. He says they drink from my mouth sips that are sweeter than tawheed. He's saying. He's saying that type of comparison is disbelief. Is disbelief. Because whatever you're offering, whether it's to them or it is you're saying this is sweeter than the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that is shirk in Allah. So what brought a person to say something like that? If they actually have these feelings and it's just a poet who's playing with words. But what if that brought a person to say something like this or feel like that? It's because this person is closer to them and to their heart than Allah Azza wa Jal, to the extent they say, yes, indeed, I am more interested in them and in being close to them, as that second verse of poetry says, وَصْلُكَ أَشْهَى إِلَى فُؤَادِي مِنْ رَحْمَةِ الْخَالِقِ الْجَلِيلِ. He says, connecting to you, being close to you is more desirable to my heart than the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. So this person, right, had given up on everything except that person that they love. Now you think that is not possible to happen to any one of us? We say, no, it's possible. It's possible. And you'll know why it's possible for it to happen. And that's why that type of sin is very pernicious. That type of sin is very difficult to cure because it actually had dominated your heart. How do you rescue yourself from it? قال ولا ريب أن هذا العشق من أعظم الشرك. He said there is no doubt that this type of shirk, this type of love, madness, is of the greatest type of shirk. So I don't want you always, when you hear shirk, for you to only think about people who are prostrating to asnam and idols, or to a fire, or people who claim that God has a son or what have you. This is also a type of shirk, but because it is more hidden, you will not be able to watch out for it and protect yourself from it. قال وكثير من العشاق. A lot of those who have this ishq will be explicit, saying that there is no place in his heart except for his beloved. Indeed, his beloved has dominated all of his heart, so he had become, in fact, a servant of or a slave of this person. They will say, my heart is fully now controlled by that person. I only think about them. I only want their happiness. Their sadness is my sadness, their happiness is my happiness. That's the only thing that I want from this world. He says, when they dominate so much, that had become shirk in Allah Azza wa Jal. They had become in a sense, you have become their abd. This is ubudiyya. Because he says, فَإِنَّ الْعُبُودِيَّةِ. If you remember how we defined al-ubudiyya? He says, it's complete love with complete submission. Utmost love with utmost submission. Remember? Right? Always keep that in mind. Utmost surrender to someone with utmost love. So it's surrender out of love. And love that brings surrender. So he says, if that is the definition of ubudiyya, that person had extracted all the love that he has and submission and gave it to this person. And that is ubudiyya. Whatever you want from me, I'll do. Right? I love no one more than you. He says, what else is this other than ubudiyya? Does it make sense? Because that's what Allah wants from your heart. You've given it to somebody else. That's why love can take you up to the highest levels of iman. Right? Until you become what? Khalilullah. This is for Ibrahim and Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. He can take you to the highest level. Or throw you to the lowest levels of shirk. And that is love. So is love good or bad? It depends on where and what you do with it. Right? قال ولا نسبة بين مفسدة هذا الأمر العظيم ومفسدة الفاحشة. He says there is even no comparison between that type of shirk and simply sexual sin. Right? As he has said, قال بعض الشيوخ العارفين, some of the shuyukh have said. He says, that I be afflicted with a sexual sin would be better than being afflicted with that type of madness in love. That type of excessive love. Because that is a sin, but the other is what? Shirk. Right? And he's not, diminishing that sin. He's only doing this in comparison. Like he will say, do you know that a sexual sin, like zina, how terrible that is? He says, yes. You know how a sexual sin like sodomy, right? How terrible that is? You say, absolutely, I understand. He says, this is worse. Because that is just eventually still is just a sin. Not that anybody should say, well, it's just a sin, let me do it. No. It's just a sin. It's a major sin. It's a difficult sin to repent from and overcome. Not impossible, but it's difficult. He said, but the other one is far more serious because it has to do with enslaving the heart. You haven't committed like any actual sexual sin with your body, but the heart had been enslaved by another. Right? قال ودواء هذا الداء القتال. He says, and the cure for this. Okay. And this is an important section. He says, the cure for this, to know that this affliction, which opposes tawheed, that type of affliction, with that type of shirk that opposes tawheed, came because of his ignorance and ghafla, the ghafla of his heart. It's the distance that his heart had from Allah Azza wa Jal, and unawareness, inattentiveness to Allah Azza wa Jal. So he has to know Allah Azza wa Jal with his tawheed and with his laws, his sunan, and with his ayahs. And also to perform ibadat internally and externally that would take you away from your attachment to that love and thinking about it. وَيُكْثِرُ اللَّجْأَ وَالتَّضَرُّعَ إِلَى اللَّهِ فِي صَرْفِ ذَلِكَ عَنْهُ وَأَنْ يَرْجِعَ بِقَلْبِهِ إِلَيْهِ. And that you would invoke Allah Azza wa Jal repeatedly and plead with Him that Allah Azza wa Jal would protect you from that addiction, from that attachment, and will revive your heart and bring it back to you. And this medicine that he is describing, rahimahullah, is a medicine for all sin. So it's really important for you to remember it, because it doesn't only apply to this, it applies to everything. So he says, why is it that this person has been afflicted with this sin? And you can think, you can generalize and you say any sin, especially one that is persistent and chronic. He says, why is that? He says, because you have jahl and ghafla. One, you're ignorant. The other one, you're distant. You got it? Ignorance and distance. He says, what is the treatment for ignorance? It's ilm. You need to learn. And I'll explain. You need to learn. What is the treatment for distance from Allah Azza wa Jal? He says, ibadah. Right? And he says, you need to add to those two a lot of dua. You need to add to it a lot of dua. So once you add this dua, Allah Azza wa Jal supports you and He helps you. But when you understand the reason, the medicine will make a lot of sense. So the first is what he's saying. Jahl. Okay. So how do you remedy jahl? We said with knowledge. He said, Tawheedullahi Azza wa Jal wa sunanahu wa ayatih. When he talks about the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, he's here not simply talking about a cerebral or technical knowledge that does not feed the heart. So you have to understand that you can study tawheed, and it's important to study tawheed, but you can study it technically. Okay, what invalidates iman? 1, 2, 3, 4. What are the conditions for this? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is this important? Absolutely. How are you going to know if it's right or wrong? How do you know if your worship is good or not? Jazakallah khair. How are you going to know all of this? But if it's simply cerebral in the head and it doesn't attach or come to the heart, is that going to help you fight off a sin? Not going to help you. So what is he talking about? He's talking about the type of tawheed that would speak to your mind and to your heart, like ibnalqayyim was talking about it. Like you know the names and attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, so you know Him better, you love Him more, you fear Him more, you feel that He's close to you. This is knowing Allah Azza wa Jal. That is His tawheed. What does Allah want from you? Then to know that Allah had given you everything, to think about the ni'am of Allah Azza wa Jal, that increases your iman. That is tawheed. That speaks to your heart. Right? So it's not just simply studying a matan or a book. Important, I'm not saying that. But if you're trying to fight off a sin, you need something that also speaks to your heart. So you need to think about Allah Azza wa Jalla and who He is, His right upon you, what He had promised you. When you talk about Jannah, it should speak to you. When you talk about Jahannam, it should speak to you. You should feel it, like I'm gonna go either here or there. Right? And the ayahs of Allah Azza wa Jalla, whether it's an ayahs in the Quran where you read and you ponder and you think, that will increase your iman. Or the ayahs in the universe, you look at Allah Azza wa Jal, what He had created, the sun and the moon and the plants and the animals, and you observe and you look, and that will increase your iman. Right? So that is knowing Allah Azza wa Jal better. طيب, that's one thing. طيب. Is that on its own enough? He's saying no. You need ibadah. And that is essential, by the way. Why do you need ibadah? At least two reasons. One, you are away from Allah Azza wa Jal. What will bring you back? So it's not just, I read something or I listened to a lecture. Okay. But then what? A lecture will last what? An hour? Khutbah half an hour. So what's left? You have how many hours each day? What are you doing? How will you stay connected? How will you stay close to Allah Azza wa Jal? How will you fight all of these continuous temptations and your thoughts as well? It's your ibadah. And he said here, مِنَ الْعِبَادَاتِ الظَّاهِرَةِ وَالْبَاطِنَةِ. Right? So before I describe al-ibadat, internal and external, it's the other reason why ibadah is important, because it will give you strength against those temptations. Instead of you being sitting idle doing nothing, you'll be preoccupied with something useful. So instead of sitting and doing or thinking about that sin or that person that I love, and the whispers keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. Instead of that, do something useful. What is the most useful thing that you can do? Worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. Because A, it will take you away from that pattern, from that habit, and will give you strength against it. Now when he said here, rahimahullah, ibadat zahira and batina, the external and the internal, the outside and the inside ibadat, here keep in mind that an ibadah is only as effective as the heart is present. Now in the beginning, it may be hard to capture your heart and bring it into a ibadah, but that doesn't really matter. As long as you are persistent in the ibadah, sooner or later, bi'idhnillah, you'll be able to bring your heart back or in. But it doesn't mean that you settle in a pattern where you only are worshipping externally. That ibadah will not be effective. You've performed the obligation, but it's not going to be able to protect you, fend off the whispers of shaitan, because internally you're not strong. So you need to kind of strive to make your salah external and internal. You make your fasting external and internal. Make staying away from the haram external and internal. You feel what you're doing. That's one meaning of al-ibadah, that is batina, internal. Okay? So anything that you do, sadaqah that you're going to give, you're not satisfied with it being only a physical activity. But you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jalla? What is the reward that you are waiting for? And you make dua and you humble yourself and you ask Allah to accept it, then you connect with that physical act that you're doing. So this is this ibadah that is batina. Another thing that is ibadah, that is batina, internal, is what? Something that does not require even the movement of the body, which is to think about Allah Azza wa Jalla. التفكر في الله عز وجل, التفكر في نعم الله, to think about the ni'mas of Allah Azza wa Jal, to think about the glory of Allah, to think about the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal, to intend to do good, to fight off any evil impulse that you have. All these things are internal, no one can see, but they are foundational and fundamental in your ibadah. So he says, engage in both types of ibadah, the one that is internal and the one that is external. And he said, and to plead with Allah Azza wa Jal and invoke Him and make a lot of dua. 1, 2, and 3. Of the 3, what is the most or the easiest one? We said learn, ibadah, and then dua. Of the 3, what is the easiest? Dua, isn't it? Because that's the thing that you can start with immediately. Because if a person tells you, go and learn about Allah Azza wa Jalla, you say, it's a process, I need to find a person, who am I going to talk to, what book am I read, I don't have the energy, I don't have the time, million excuses. Ibadah, I don't have the energy yet, I'm trying but I'm not succeeding. Okay. What is the thing that is going to help you with those two? Is dua. It is the easiest thing to do. Especially dua that is persistent, dua that happens and the times when dua is accepted. You take advantage of every Friday, right? Every Friday, dua is accepted. You take advantage of it. So you have a weekly routine of that dua. Because remember here, we are dealing with something that is chronic, right? You want to change. You want to be better. You want to leave a habit and adopt a different one. So how is this going to happen? It needs persistence. So a dua every Friday. Dua at the last part of the night. Dua between adhan and iqamah. Dua when you are in sujood. So whenever dua is accepted, dua in Ramadan. Some of these things, by the way, it may take, depending on the person, depending on what the ailment is, it may take a couple of years for a person to overcome them. So dua in Ramadan. Or if you happen to go to Umrah and Hajj, especially Umrah because you're going to have more time in the Haram, you go to the Haram and you just sit and you ask Allah Azza wa Jal. Like that's your express purpose. I'm going there for this, and you keep making dua and asking Allah Azza wa Jal to help you with that. You're in the best of places. But does it have to be in Mecca? Does it have to be in Ramadan? Does it have? It says no, it doesn't have to. You could start immediately. And the more dua that you make, the more likely that Allah Azza wa Jal will assist you. So he says 1, 2, and 3. And he says, وَلَيْسَ لَهُ دَوَاءٌ أَنْفَعُ مِنَ الْإِخْلَاصِ لِلَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. And there is no better medicine than sincerity. Ikhlas to Allah Azza wa Jal. Meaning if you try to be more sincere in your ibadah, even if you take few modest steps, a little bit more sincere in your sadaqah, a little bit more sincere in your dua, a little bit more present and sincere in your dhikr. He says there's nothing more beneficial than ikhlas, because he says this is the dawa, this is the medicine that Allah described in the Quran when talking about Yusuf alayhi salam. قال كذلك لنصرف عنه السوء والفحشاء إنه من عبادنا المخلصين. He says such we did so that we would protect him from harm and fahsha, sin or sexual sin. Indeed, he is from our sincere servants. So ibnalqayyim is saying, فأخبر, Allah Azza wa Jal said that He had diverted fahsha away from him, as-su, which is su, that is ishq. He protected him from it, and protected him from sexual sin because of his ikhlas. So Allah Azza wa Jal protects you because of your ikhlas. So if you want to be protected, increase your ikhlas. And if you are in this process of finding a cure and escaping that sin, increase your ikhlas, because Allah Azza wa Jal will help you. And you can kind of see the result and the connection between them. Because the person who is striving to have ikhlas is trying to clean their heart. Right? And Allah sees that. That's the most difficult thing. You could perform a ibadah externally. Okay? But to actually strive internally to be sincere, that is not easy. When Allah sees that from you, that you are trying to clean your heart, Allah assists you and cleans that heart for you and protects you from further sin. Right? قال فإن القلب إذا خلص وأخلص عمله لله لم يتمكن منه عشق الصور فإنه إنما يتمكن من قلب فارغ. He says, because indeed if the heart is pure, خلص وأخلص, and it's sincere in its actions to Allah Azza wa Jal, ishq will not enter it. Ishq, right? That exaggerated love will not enter it. فإنه إنما يتمكن من قلب فارغ. It will only dominate and take hold of an empty heart. And that is an important point here. And he said, as the poet had said, أتاني هواها قبل أن أعرف الهوى فصادف قلبا خاليا فتمكن. He says, her love or her hawa, desiring her, came to me before I knew what love and desire was. So it found an empty heart, so it took hold. Right? So remember before we talked about the first love and why the first love is the most stubborn and the one that stays the longer? Why is that? Because you did not love before. I mean, you loved your parents, right? You loved a pet, you loved a friend, yeah. But if you're talking about romantic love, why is it that the first love is the most stubborn of it all? Right? Even, subhanAllah, even if you love anything else, كم منزل في الأرض يألفه الفتى وحنينه أبدا لأول منزلي نقل فؤادك حيث شئت من الهوى ما الحب إلا للحبيب الأول. He says, how many houses or how many homes you may live in, but you always remember what? The first house. You know your parents' house? The first one that you grew in? Even if you guys moved, you'll probably remember the very first one. Why? Because that's home. That's home before there was any home. Right? Even if it's modest, even if it's small, but your memories in it are the most pleasurable memories. So it's the same thing. It doesn't matter how many homes you inhabit. Even if you live in a mansion, you'll always remember the first home. It doesn't matter how many people you love, you'll always remember the first love. So he's saying here, why is it? He said, as that poet has said, he says, I got to love her, okay, or I knew her love before any other love. And my heart was empty, clean, right, innocent. And so it's settled. So any other love that's going to come is going to have to compete with that love and whatever has precipitated after that love. So ibnalqayyim is saying something very significant. He says, if you have ikhlas, you have iman in your heart, it is impossible for ishq to come and settle in because it's already occupied. There's already someone. Who's that? Allah Azza wa Jal. So that love cannot come and dominate. You still will love your spouse, right? There is space for that. You still will love your children. There is still space for that. But the love for your spouse will not be bigger than the love of Allah Azza wa Jal, because the love of Allah is already established. It'll be smaller next to it. The love for your children will never not be bigger than the love of Allah Azza wa Jal, because what? The love of Allah is already established. And that tells you that the heart has never been intended to be empty. It can never be empty. Just like a pot, right? Even if there's nothing in it, there's air. It's never going to be empty. Something will fill it. Now, it's up to you. You either fill it or somebody else fills it. And when you fill it, typically you would say you're going to try to fill it with the best, right? Like when you make your own meal, don't you put the best ingredients for yourself so that you would eat the best? But if somebody else is making food for you, and they may not care about you, it doesn't really matter what ingredients go into that food. They don't care. So either you're going to fill it with the best, and that is loving Allah Azza wa Jal, or if you leave it empty, it's going to be filled with garbage. You'll be on, watching social media, garbage. Most of it, right? Garbage. You go on, you're watching movies or what have you, entertainment, garbage. Music, garbage, and that's going to fill your heart. And in it, of course, they do want you to be attached sexually and emotionally to a beautiful image. They want that, right? Because the more that attached you are, the more that you will stay, the more that you pay attention, and your attention is money. So they want that. And that is weakness. So he says that's not going to happen if a person has iman in Allah Azza wa Jal. So he's already telling you about another, right? Which is ikhlas, and iman. He says if you have this, you'll be protected بإذن الله عز وجل. قال وليعلم العاقل أن العقل والشرع يوجبان تحصيل المصالح وتكميلها وإعدام المفاسد وتقليلها. He says, and know that, you have to understand that both intellect or wisdom and religiously, when you look at the world, you want to get benefits and avoid harms. Right? Like religiously, but also he says rationally. You look at what is beneficial and you want to bring it closer to you, right? And you want to look at what is harmful and you want to avoid it. So he's saying, and that وَهَذَا يَتَرَتَّبُ عَلَيْهِ, he says, and you have two things, to do two things to accomplish this. One that is knowledge-based and that is action-based. So the knowledge-based is what? He says you want to know what is beneficial and what is harmful. The action-based is, well, if you know that it is harmful, you avoid it. If you know it's beneficial, you take it. If it's both harmful and beneficial, you want to assess, is it more harmful or more beneficial? If it's more beneficial, you take it. If it's more harmful, you avoid it. So you have to know and you have to act. Sahih? This is how you proceed in life. This is right, okay, I'll do it. This is wrong, then I won't do it. He says, then you have to understand what is the benefit in ishq. He was saying, talking about benefits and harm. He says, what is the benefit in ishq? There is no religious benefit and there is no worldly benefit. In fact, the harm that is in it is much, much more than any benefit that it can bring you, because. And now he's going to list some of the harms of ishq. He says the first one, he says, when you're preoccupied with loving someone to that extent, to that magnitude, it will take you away from loving Allah Azza wa Jal. And they both cannot be combined, not at the same magnitude. So if you love this one, it will erase the love of the other or chase it out. Now we said, you could love different people. There will be no competition there. You could love your children and your spouse. You could love anything. But he's talking about here about a level of love that dominates. He says, if the love of Allah Azza wa Jal is dominant, you cannot have a love of a human being that is also dominant. They cannot both be dominant in the same heart. Just like you can't have two kings ruling the same land, right? Two masters at the same time that you're listening to them. This is impossible. You either have this as a master or that as a master. This as a king or that as a king. Who's the king of your heart? If it's Allah Azza wa Jal who has the ultimate rule and the ultimate say, then it's not another human being. There will always be subservient and secondary to Allah Azza wa Jal. Or if it's a human being, he will by necessity chase out the love of Allah Azza wa Jal and minimize it. So he says that's the greatest or the first harm. He says the second, عذاب قلبه بمعشوقه فإن من أحب شيئا غير الله عذب به ولا بد. This is also another gem from him. These are the things that you really should remember for later, right? He says that your heart will be tormented because of your beloved. Because whoever loves anything or anyone other than Allah Azza wa Jal, it will torment you necessarily. Whoever loves anyone or anything other than Allah Azza wa Jal, it will torment you necessarily. And he said, again, he's bringing here a poet. قال فما في الأرض, and this is beautiful actually, فما في الأرض أشقى من محب وإن وجد الهوى حلو المذاق. He says there is no one on this earth more miserable than a person in love. Even if he finds that love is sweet. Even if he finds that love is sweet, there's no one more miserable than a person who's loved. You'll see him crying all the time out of fear of separation or for longing. So he cries if they leave because he misses them. And he cries when they are around because he's afraid of losing them. So فَتَسْخُنُ عَيْنُهُ, so his eye is hot with those tears when they are distant, and his eye is hot with tears when they meet. Meaning he's crying all the time. So someone who loves another, he says he's miserable or he's crying all the time. If they are far, he's crying. And if they are close, he's crying as well. So he's in what? He's always miserable. Where does that misery come from? Separation. And the fear of separation. Even if they are close to you. Right? You're always in your head is what? I may separate from them. Right? It doesn't matter who you love. And by the way, when he says loving other than Allah Azza wa Jal, he doesn't mean in opposition to Allah. I think he means anyone other than Allah Azza wa Jal. You love your parents, that love to an extent is going to be tormenting. You love your kids to an extent is going to be tormenting and difficult. You love your spouse to an extent it's tormenting and it's difficult. You love good food to an extent it's tormenting. Whatever you want to love. Except, the only exception is Allah Azza wa Jal. But everybody else, he says, that love is going to bother you. And that love is going to torment you. And that love is going to torture you. You know what is the only thing that could remove that torment away from that love? Allah Azza wa Jal. Because there is this promise of reunification. I may miss, you say, they're not going to be around. He says, but eventually, if I and they are pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal, we'll be together. What if I lose them and they die? Is if you and them are pious, Allah reunites you. So you don't have to be so tormented by it. But take Allah Azza wa Jal out, every love is tormenting. As He said, if they are far, you're thinking about them, wishing that they will be close to you. But even when they're close, when is the next time I'm going to be separated from them? What will happen to them when I die? What will happen to me if they die? That's tormenting. So that's why he's saying that, especially for that person who is madly in love, because Allah Azza wa Jal is not a factor in their heart, in their relationship, they'll be tormented by it. قال وإن الثالث, the third, إن العاشق قلبه أسير في قبضة غيره يسومه الهوان ولكن لسكرة العشق لا يشعر بمصابه. He says that the one who is afflicted with this mad love, he says his heart is captive in the hands of another who is making him taste degradation and humiliation, but because of his intoxication, because of love, he does not feel that affliction. And he said, as the poet had said, كعصفورة في كف طفل يسومها حياض الردى والطفل يلهو ويلعب. It says, like a little bird in the hands of a child, and the child is about to suffocate it and kill it, but for the child he's what? Simply playing. Like the experience for both is drastically different. For the child who doesn't know right from wrong, he's playing with this bird. And for him it's fun and he's laughing, right? So for him, it's nothing. It's actually fun. He's playing with someone. For the bird, he's dying. You see the difference, right? For the bird, he's dying. So he said that this person who is madly in love, his heart is captive in the hands of another. That person on the other side may not care about him. Or knows, not care about him, I mean that he doesn't care that he's actually in love with him. Or knows that he is in love and he's using it. As it happens, when you know that somebody is subservient to you, you have power over them, but you don't really care, you use them. You torment them. You take their money, you tell them how to live, you steer them in specific directions, you humiliate them, and the person follows anything and everything you say to them because they are without choice. Right? You control them and they have no control. He says that is humiliation and degradation. And why would anybody want that for themselves? To hand over the keys of their souls and their body to somebody else and say, control me as you wish. Why would you want that for yourself? So before it happens, you stop yourself. And he said, كما قال, as another poet had said, ملكت فؤادي بالقطيعة والجفا وأنت خلي البال تلهو وتلعب. He says, you've dominated and you possessed my heart with being aloof and by abandoning me, but while you at the same time are carefree, having fun. Yani I'm on the one hand, I'm being tormented. You've possessed my heart completely by being aloof, by not talking to me. Whereas on the other hand, you are carefree. So that is what this unequal relationship between those two people. Someone is completely dominated by another. And again, he's saying, why do you want to do that? قال أنه يشتغل به عن مصالح دينه ودنياه. The fourth reason why there's no benefit in ishq. He says it distracts you, it takes you away from the benefits of your religion and your worldly benefit. and there's nothing that will distract you and take you away from your benefits, what really is beneficial and good for you, than that type of mad love. قال أما مصالح الدين. He says, as for religious benefits, he says it all hinges around bringing the heart together, the fragmentation of the heart together, and focusing it on Allah Azza wa Jal. And he says being in that type of love fragments the heart. So that's interesting about the heart, by the way. That the heart by nature is fragmented. Okay? What do you mean by fragmented? I like this. After an hour, I like that. I'm thinking about this. After a day, I'm thinking about the opposite. I hate this. I love that. I'm thinking about all sorts of things. So in your heart, it's everywhere. You want to do everything. You're afraid of everything. You love everything. You understand how fragmented the heart is? Moves from one thing to the other, from one thing to the other. It lacks focus. So, okay, لَمُّ شَعَثِ الْقَلْبِ. It's like a hair being disheveled. You want to comb it. And when it's combed and it's tidy, that's when it's best. So the heart is like that, uncombed, disheveled, everywhere. He says, what brings it together? Like a magnet. He says, Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? So when you walk towards Allah Azza wa Jal, all of your affairs are in order. How? Because you know, oh, this is wrong, I won't do it. So it's not distracting. This is right, focus on it. So you have focus. This is right, but something is more important. I'll focus on the more important one. Whispers come, that's wrong, you leave it. You seek Allah's assistance, so your heart is consistent and is focused. Huh? That is supposed to be the heart of the believer, a focused heart. He says, but when you start loving without discretion, without an intention, loving this and loving this and loving this and loving that, it distracts the heart. And especially when you are enslaved, that type of love. قال وأما مصالح الدنيا. He says, as for worldly benefits, he says, indeed, they are a consequence of religious benefits. He says, if you are not or cannot gain your religious benefits, then your worldly benefits will be also wasted as well. Meaning, if you're not good religiously, in a worldly sense, you also are wasted and you're not good. And that is also a really good point. Because sometimes we think that, you can even think about it in terms of states and nations, but also in terms of individuals, that we could be successful in a worldly sense, but not a religious sense. Right? The question is, how do you know what success is in a worldly sense? That's a basic question. How do you know when you are successful in a worldly sense? Or who defines it? And you will find nations and people who got really rich and miserable. Right? Like really rich. The most advanced nations, right, in the world today. And you go inside and you explore how they're living and what they're living, and you find that they're not happy. And they're complaining. And they're crumbling on the inside. Or you go to a rich person and he has a lot. He's not happy. So what is success? How did you define it? So ibnalqayyim is saying that if you are religiously unsuccessful, you by necessity unsuccessful in the dunya. But in order to be successful in the dunya, religion guides you. It tells you, enough, you don't need that much money. Focus on something else. Yeah, you can be rich if you wish, but don't put it ahead of Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's the definition of success. Don't put it ahead of raising your kids. Don't put it ahead of your family. Don't put it ahead of justice and honesty, because money is not everything. So that defines success for a person, but also defines it for a community and defines it for a nation. So he says, if you are not religiously successful, you cannot be worldly successful in a worldly sense. He says the fifth. Maybe that will take that and stop, inshallah. He says that the harms of the dunya and the akhirah are quickest to those who are afflicted with that type of illness, faster than a fire goes through wood. And he says the reason that that's the case is that if a person is afflicted with that type of love, with ishq, he is far away from Allah Azza wa Jal. And the furthest hearts away from Allah Azza wa Jal are the ones who are afflicted with that sin. And if the heart is far from Allah Azza wa Jal, all harms will come to it and the shaitan will dominate it. And if the shaitan dominates it, he will not leave a way to harm you except he will harm you with. And that again is very useful to keep in mind. He says if your heart is away from Allah Azza wa Jal, then you're not under His protection. Makes sense? You're not under Allah's protection. You're not calling on Allah Azza wa Jal to help you. So who's around you then? Shaitan is around you. If shaitan is around you and he is able to dominate your heart, your intent is to destroy you, to sadden you, to disturb you. He says he will do everything in his power to harm you. So he'll bring all that harm to you because he has the power, he has access. You have no protection. So that's why he's saying that afatu dunya, all the harms of the akhirah and the dunya will come to you. And generalize this. It's not just about this sin, by the way, but any type of sin. When you are away from Allah Azza wa Jal, distress will come to you because shaitan will bring it. Why? Because he has the power. Why? Because you've let him. So you mentally, you will not be fine. You'll have a lot of whispers. You'll have a lot of disturbing thoughts. A lot of bad memories creep up. You have a lot of worry. Things may not be going right. And even if they could be just average, but you don't know how to deal with it. I just lost this or may lose that. I don't know how to deal with that stress. I don't know how to deal with my anger. Everything escalates, everything gets worse and worse and worse. Why is it all coming against you? This is because shaitan is bringing it against you. Because he has the power, so he can destroy you. So you need that protection. Come close to Allah Azza wa Jal. So again, this is really beneficial if you find that your heart is unsettled and you find that you are not doing well. Consider how close and far you are to Allah Azza wa Jal. Because the closer you are to Allah, Allah Azza wa Jal supports you and solves some of these problems for you. Sometimes protects you from them before they even come. Solves them for you sometimes or guides you to their solution. But if you allow yourself to actually be far from Allah Azza wa Jal, everything starts going wrong. Right? No. So let me stop here, inshallah, so don't kind of step into the salah and give you time, inshallah, to ask questions. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the question here is, in the context of relationships, haram or halal, if a person claims that they love you and want to be with you, you shouldn't let yourself be swayed by this and love them back. No, I mean, we're not against love. Like if a person say, let's say in a halal context, so I'm gonna avoid the haram and the complications of the haram. But if a person says that they love you, so your spouse says that she loves you, you say that you love your spouse, or you say to a brother, I love you for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, something like that. Or a sister says to a sister, I love you for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. It doesn't mean that when they say that, when they express that, you need to kind of stay away from them, right? No, you are allowed to love and be loved. What we're talking about here is the type of excessive, exaggerated, mad love that is called ishq, okay? That, crosses the reasonable bounds. That's the thing. But let's suppose, for instance, for whatever reason, let's not assume why, for whatever reason, you're in love with someone, right? It doesn't mean that you should never marry them. No, go ahead and marry them, because marriage will cultivate that love, and this is something we'll talk about, inshallah. It's going to preserve and nourish that love. If they love you, it doesn't mean that you need to run away from them because they love you. No. The only thing that we're talking is saying here, if you want to safeguard, just love Allah Azza wa Jal, and bi'idhnillah Azza wa Jal, you will be protected from that exaggerated love. Bi-idhnillah azza wa jal. If a person experiences ishq the first time while trying his best to remember Allah Azza wa Jal, how does the person ensure that it doesn't happen the next time, especially in the context of getting to know a potential spouse? We'll talk about, inshallah Azza wa Jal, kind of how to balance that. Usually ishq happens, I'm saying usually, not all the time, but usually ishq happens when there's a distance. Right? And the distance, and ibnalqayyim will talk about it, the distance kind of veils your eyes so you don't see the imperfections and the shortcomings of the other person. When you marry someone, okay, you will see them as they are, right? You will see them as they are. You will see the good and the bad. You will see the good things that are going for them, but also their shortcomings and imperfections. So you're not going to be swayed by that type of love because it's real. The problem with ishq, it's unreal. It's romanticized. The person is painted in a perfect image. There's nothing wrong with them. So one of the ways for you to overcome that type of love, as we will talk about inshallah azza wa jal, is to think and discover the imperfections of that person. Every human being has imperfections, just as a human being, right? Like we all smell, right? Or no? We all smell, right? Okay. So if you think that about the other that is stealing your heart and that they must, just like any other human being, okay? And you start seeing an imperfection. Like you could be, it could be revolting, right? Like you could be repulsed by something from them if they don't shower, let's say. If you think about that imperfection, you'll understand them as a human being. And if you understand them as a human being, you're not going to be so dominated by that love. So, how to protect yourself from it, especially if it happened the first time? Think about the imperfection of that person. Do get married, right, with them, because this, inshallah, will cure or will overcome whatever wrong attachment you have and increase your love for Allah Azza wa Jal, right? Focus on your ibadah and focus on ikhlas and being close to Allah Azza wa Jal so that love doesn't dominate you. And know that no matter what happens, this person is immortal, meaning they are gonna die. And that mortality should behoove you to say that I cannot rely on them and give them my heart. Only Allah Azza wa Jal deserves it. Right? And if we're talking about a person who you cannot marry, right, then you need immediate separation. And we'll talk about that, inshallah. So you don't keep talking to them, and you definitely don't keep looking at them so that you stop thinking about them. Right? So that's one thing, inshallah, that you can do. Okay, anybody here has questions? Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sheikh, I was asking, at what time should I think, or someone should think is successful to the Almighty Allah? And is success determined by your heart, by actions, or else how can I prevent, if I know that I'm successful, how can I prevent myself from killing? Knowing that, alhamdulillah, now I think Allah has accepted what I'm doing, or alhamdulillah, it's going smoothly.
So the first part is how? Can you repeat the first part?
How can I determine that I'm successful?
How can you determine that you are successful? So, if you spell it out, what is successful? Like, what is success? Our ultimate success is what? To be in Jannah. That is success. And while we are in this life, to worship Allah Azza wa Jal in ways that are pleasing to Him, that eventually will put us in Jannah. How can I know that I am successful? Until you put your foot in Jannah, you're not going to know for sure. Huh? Yeah, it's still in the journey, right? You're not going to know for sure. So until you are in Jannah, you're not going to know that you are successful or not. But you see a probability, a likelihood. You're on the right path. Bi-idhnillah Azza wa Jal, you're doing things that are pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal. You're staying away from things that are displeasing to Allah. You're trying your best, you're striving. You're asking Allah for forgiveness when you make mistakes. You're upon that path. So you hope for the best. and you want to do more of that. That is what you deem and interpret as success. But to say that I am successful, not until you're in Jannah. That prevents kibr. Yeah, exactly. There's fear. Okay, that what if what I'm doing is not enough? So you do more. And you hope from Allah Azza wa Jal, and that kind of energizes you, because I want more from Allah, and Allah is waiting for me, so you do even more and more. As long as you're doing this, bi'idhnillah Azza wa Jal, you're upon the path. But it's going to prevent you from kibr, because what if what I'm doing is not enough? Astaghfirullah, and then you go back. So you never really look at yourself and what you're doing. That's how you define it. Yes.
A lot of the times, like, we keep track of, or I should say I, keep track of, like, when we think about ibadah and being close to Allah, we look at what we're doing in terms of physical ibadah, as you described, external ibadah. And so I was thinking out when you talk about internal ibadah, how important is it, and should there be some sort of like 50-50 ratio? Because most of the time we just go to salah and fasting and outward, most of the time we do such ibadah. But the internal ones that you described, thinking about Allah and tadabbur and so on, how much space should it take?
No. So the brother's asking how much space should that internal ibadah al-batina, internal ibadah take? I mean, should it be a 50-50 ratio or what? So, first of all, we say that, I said that internal ibadah could be and should be part of the external ibadah as well. So if you put it there, it'd be almost a 50-50, right? Because as you are performing that ibadah physically, you're also internally engaged in ibadah. So you are reading, but you are feeling, right? You are glorifying, and you're feeling closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. So in that sense, while you are performing it, it's almost a 50-50, right? But the one that is distinctly and only internal, that is as long as it is possible for you to commit that. You cannot put a number, right? You cannot put an hours on it. But as much as is needed and as much is available, this is what you want to do. More people might need it more than others. Some people might be really good at it, and others maybe not as much, right? So whatever is available, but some of it is needed, because this is the thing that is going to increase your iman, and especially works at immunizing you against those types of sins and those types of whispers. So a number is very hard to come by, or a ratio is really hard to come by, but you say more of it, more of it. And the more a person does it, the more a person is knowledgeable, the more effective his ibadah would be. Because the more that you know about Allah Azza wa Jal, the more effective that ibadah is. The more that you, let's say, know about Jannah and Jahannam or what have you, the more effective that your ibadah will be. So it's also not always about time, but also about kind of the quality of what a person is doing. I just want to go back to the question because he clarified. He says, because even if they do really love you, it can fade, and they can't guarantee that they will always love you. And since no one controls their heart like that, and also if they met you and fell in love with you for whatever reason, then it's possible for someone else to come along who is better than you, and they will fall in love with them. Okay. Just like they went from not loving you to loving you, they can go from loving you to no. Okay, I understand. Hence, a person shouldn't let someone be swayed by this. You can't kind of shut everybody out because there's a possibility they may not love you later, because that may not happen also. Like a person could love you and they could love you for the rest of their lives, right? Or they could love you and then they lose that love later. Both are a possibility. But if you're going to deprive yourself of love because simply it may be the case that a person may lose interest in you later, then you're not going to love anybody at all. That if you're not going to have children because they might die, then you're not going to have children at all. If you're not going to have a job because you may lose it, will you have a job? So you don't want to deny yourself kind of the beauty of love. Loving somebody else is beautiful. So don't deny yourself that if something bad is going to happen. If it's going to happen, let it happen. People die. Like they could die or they could just lose interest in you. Either way, you lost them. That's fine. Allah Azza wa Jalla will give you patience and a substitute. But don't deprive yourself. And please, it's like I'm asking you, don't deprive yourself. There's no need for you to do this. Last one, inshallah. I know someone who loves me and wants me good, but anger comes and I curse and say things completely opposite. Is it possible to live and make du'as like that? I'm not 100% sure what you mean, but what I understand is that somebody loves you, but sometimes you get angry and you lash out and you say things maybe that you don't mean. Is it possible kind of to maintain that relationship, or is it possible to make dua? So if a person loves you, appreciate it and don't ruin that love. If you can't control your tongue, if you're too angry, what have you, ask Allah Azza wa Jal to support you. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to change you. And ask the person to help you on that journey of change, right? So if a person loves you, it's a gift. Don't ruin that love with your actions. That's what I understand. If I did not understand it fully, inshallah, ask me next time, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal. طيب, جزاكم الله خير. We'll meet bi'idhnillah azza wa jal next week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.